Go. Hey everyone, my name is Kevin Navratil, and I'm a political science professor at Moraine Valley. I'm joined by my colleagues Mary Fleece Dunkel and Dr. Darren Schreck. And we were not scheduled to have a talk today. Our next one is July 24th, but unfortunately we had a horrible weekend of attempted assassination attempt of former President Donald Trump at a rally in Pennsylvania, and we thought we'd spend a few minutes trying to talk about what happened and what it might mean for America. So I drew the unlucky straw of going first, and I was instantly just saddened on Saturday when I learned the situation of what had happened at the rally. I wasn't able to follow it closely until later in the evening, but was relieved to find out that he survived and just had the wound on his ear. I think it would have been a really horrific day if the bullet, had killed him and resulted in, the killing of the presumptive nominee for the Republican Party. But I still truly worry. I know we've had events as the Democracy Commitment Coordinator. We've had several events over the last several years about escalating political violence. We've made it clear that we think there's real problems in the United States. What happened Saturday is clearly unique in the sense of modern presidential candidate being targeted. But in U.S. history, there's been, of course, many presidents or presidential candidates who have been targeted. And some of those have been successful, unfortunately. So we do have a pretty tragic history in the United States. I think the other takeaway that I had is just in some ways, although I was so surprised on Saturday, in other ways this is fairly predictable in the sense of how much escalating rhetoric, but not just rhetoric, we've actually had escalating political violence. There's been, attempted abduction of a governor in Michigan. Steve Scalise, a House of Representative, was shot at a baseball game between Democrats and Republicans. January 6th was another horrific day for the United States. And I'm not trying to compare any of these. And I'm not going to give you the comprehensive list of examples of political violence in the United States, but unfortunately there has been many. And none of us can predict where we're headed from this point. And I do think it's an important point in our trajectory of things could get better and things could definitely get worse. I'm hopeful over the weekend that there was communication between current President Joe Biden and former President Donald Trump. I think that was helpful. Joe Biden had a speech from the Oval Office last night. I think Donald Trump's rhetoric has also A, been limited, but B, been much more a different type of communication that we've been seeing from Donald Trump in recent days too. So today is Monday and will be the beginning of the Republican convention. We just learned that J.D. Vance was named the vice presidential nominee for the ticket. So there's a lot that we could talk about. We are going to keep it short today because this is a very unplanned meeting, but we wanted to kind of share some just off the cuff initial thoughts that we had from the weekend. So Darren, what are your takeaways?
I drew the straw of going second, but I think Mary and I both said that we were going to go second, so that forced Kevin to go first. The question that I have is it going to get worse or is it going to get better over the next 4 months or over the next 4 years, for example? And I'm going to take from a website or from something that I saw on Threads from the American Values Coalition, and I'm just going to say it like this, that in order for us to determine if it's going to get better or worse, language matters. And according to the American Values Coalition, I'll go through some of the things that they talk about. And a lot of it has to do with social media and the fervor and the vitriol that we find online these days, that it basically has not been quelled in any fashion. It's been going on for years, and it came to a head, I think, this past Saturday. And it will probably continue on if we continue on that in that mindset. So what the American Values Coalition said is, number one, don't share or repost messages that simply speculate without evidence on the causes or consequences of the assassination attempt. And that could be about any issue whatsoever. Passions are hot right now. You may hear a family member, a friend, or coworker say something that really pisses you off, but don't add fuel to the fire. Seek to lower, not raise the temperature. Be patient. Remember that much of the media is in a rush to publish as much as information as it can on this event. And in that rush, it's likely to get things wrong. Simply wait and you will learn more accurate information. And this one too, I'm going to add on to. It said, seek justice and peace. Look for efforts in your own community where you can work to address political violence. There may be some in reaction to Saturday's events or programs already in place where you can make a contribution. And I think that last one really hits it on the head, that in this country we have a decline in what we would call social capital, where we don't invest in our communities anymore. And I'm not talking about from a financial investment. I'm talking about getting to know your neighbor, getting to know what events are taking place in your communities, meeting different people, getting outside of your tribes. That not everybody who is conservative thinks a certain way, not everybody who is liberal thinks a certain way, and the other side to your argument is not the enemy. It's just somebody's perspective on the way policies or the way the community is supposed to be working. I look forward to a day that we talk about taxes again, we talk about abortion, we talk about infrastructure, we talk about immigration from a civil perspective. And that I hope for is going to bring us into a better situation than a worse off situation in the next 4 months or the next 4 years and so on. Mary?
Yes, thank you. I echo what both of you just said. Like Kevin, I agree. This was not, it was unexpected, but not unexpected, if that makes any sense. Like you're surprised and you're shocked. And I think it's one of those moments where you can always remember what you were doing when you hear like kind of news like that. But I also was not particularly surprised, given the tenor of many of the events, any of Trump's events. And I want to be very, very clear that just because if I'm saying that the fact that Trump's rhetoric has always been quite, he talks a lot about the idea of, punch that guy in the face and using kind of a lot of violent rhetoric in his own words, doesn't mean that he deserves to be shot. Not absolutely not. But it wasn't all that surprising to me because I was thinking about I believe it's on January 6th that I think it was actually Farah, whose last name is escaping me. If either one of you, I had it just a second ago. Farah Griffin was one of his aides. Talked about the idea that on January 6th, he didn't want to keep people. He was concerned about the size of his crowds and was trying to keep more people coming in. And the Secret Service said, "Well, we've got a lot of people coming in with weapons." And he said, "Well, they're not going to use those weapons on me. They're not here to use those weapons on me." So the idea of hearing that and then kind of linking those—that's one of the first things I thought of when I heard about the shooting. So it didn't really surprise me. That being said, it's also extremely, it takes it to this other level, right? I mean, the last president, I mean, he's a former president who shot was Reagan, and that's been a long time ago. But it is very concerning. And of course, just the overall media reaction. Did either of you guys catch the one guy one of the gentlemen at the rally then got on the microphone and started yelling at the media, like screaming at the journalists in the crowd and basically saying that it was their fault, which I'm kind of wondering, like, they're sort of an easy target, right? The media, and I hear my students use that term all the time, the media. Like, what does that even mean? So if we're talking about mainstream media, there is this constant rush that, they are just, and when I say they, I mean the networks. These are corporate owned networks that are funded through advertisement. So they want ratings. And so, there's the old expression, when it bleeds, it leads. And this is literally bleeding, right? That image of Trump with the blood on his face. I mean, he is excellent at basically at optics, right? And he knew exactly what to do in that moment, which is actually pretty amazing. I got to give him props for that. But this has happened before, right? The media kind of rushes into something and starts like making all these like, what's going on, and they're all talking over one another, and they're all rushing to try to make a prediction over what happened and who did it and why they did it. And responsible news organizations are going to actually wait till they get the facts before they start speculating. And I think a lot of that is a legacy of what happened with Representative Gabby Giffords back in 2011, I think it was. Was it 2011, you guys, or 2010? 2011, I think, when she was shot at one of her own rallies in Arizona, and both Fox News and National Public Radio declared that she was dead before there had been confirmation. And she is very much, in fact, alive. And they had to come back, they had to go back and recall the story, retract the story, excuse me. So that kind of that overall, and it's not from a sense of like bias, because I hear my students use that word a lot too. It's not about that. It's about ratings. It's about what's going to get us higher ratings. And a story like this just feeds beautifully into that narrative. So I think just in terms of for the future, I fear that this is not the end of it. Despite the rhetoric that I heard from even RFK Jr., who has a history, his own father was assassinated in 1968, was saying it would be great to see Biden and Trump get out there together and talk, which that would have been wonderful. But the politics, I'm sure would interfere and keep that from happening. Both their teams, I'm sure, would probably discourage that. Trump's team would probably want that. Biden's team would probably discourage that from happening, I would imagine, for a variety of reasons. So that's kind of where my thoughts are. I feel like they're kind of all over the place. I'm sorry, but this is it is a sad day for America.
Yeah, right. Just a couple things to piggyback off of. I think it is a real opportunity for both President Biden and former President Trump to be leaders and calm the country and model the type of rhetoric that matches the moment of speaking to our higher values. And we've had a lot of rhetoric that I think has been the opposite of that. And I think it's a point that I've spent a lot debating with friends over the last few days. There's that trite statement, which is true, that political violence has no place in America, but of course it does. Historically, we've had political violence, and in recent years, we've had political violence. So it is pretty pervasive. And if you look at public opinion polls, many Americans think we're headed for a second civil war. We even have a Hollywood movie that came out this year called Civil War. I think in part because there's so much concern or even almost like it's inevitable. And so I think one of my reactions on, nothing Donald Trump has said or done should ever make him the, target of an assassin. That's just completely unjustified, as another trite statement of ballots, not bullets. We settle our disputes through the democratic process. And that's, if you disagree with former President Trump, then that's the way you should handle this. But we've had so much violence in recent years, and the rhetoric has been pretty bad. And I thought, so now J.D. Vance, who's the vice presidential nominee, on 2 hours after Trump was shot, said the central premise of the Biden campaign is that President Donald Trump is an authoritarian fascist who must be stopped at all costs. The rhetoric directly led to President Trump's attempted assassination. I think I mentioned earlier Representative Scalise, who was the victim of a political attack. He said, for weeks, Democratic leaders have been feeling ludicrous hysteria that Donald Trump winning re-election would be the end of democracy in America. Clearly, we've seen the far-left lunatics act on violent rhetoric in the past. This incendiary rhetoric must stop. I think that there is definitely blame on both sides. But that doesn't in an objective way, I don't think there's blame equally on both sides. And specifically about these justifications or trying to make a claim that somehow making arguments about the threat of democracy, which international organizations that objectively assess democracies every year have, this is organizations like Freedom House, VDEM, they have downgraded the American democracy during the Trump years. There was a decline of democracy in the United States. I mean, that's an objective, that's objective organizations looking at democracy. It has declined based on January 6th, trying to overturn election, lying about elections, and some of this talk about being dictator on day one. I don't think it is out of bounds to for a presidential candidate like Joe Biden to bring up concerns about democracy. I don't think that that is in any way directly led to an attack on President Trump. Again, we don't know the motivations of the shooter, but yeah, I spent a lot of time debating with various friends on that specific topic. So there's one thing I wanted to share with both of you. I'm not sure what you think about that.
Well, it's like we were talking about before we got started. And for people watching this right now, this is our 5th or 6th time that we tried to get our bandwidth to start working properly. So we're having, we're kind of giddy at, slap happy during this. But it's nice to have a conversation about this aspect of it, rather than looking at it from the horse race perspective, which as soon as the assassination attempt happened, many people were already starting to look and ask questions about poll numbers. And that's the problem, one of the problems that we have, at least with the electoral side of our process, is that we constantly look at the numbers and how the numbers are going to change from day to day. Well, and I'm glad we're not necessarily having a conversation about that. We have a convention this week on the Republican side where Trump's numbers will go up, and then they will come back down. And then the Democratic convention will take place, and traditionally their numbers will go up and then they will come back down. So if we continue to look at things from the rhetoric perspective and the policy perspective, and not from the horse race, who's winning, who's losing perspective, then we can kind of put our democratic principles in mind as to what's most important, what's important to upkeep. The idea of freedom of speech, the idea of the freedom to assemble, the idea of freedom to religion and protest and to petition our government. Those are the most important aspects that we're talking about. What happened on Saturday was abhorrent and evil, and it needs to be addressed as such. However, we're not going to look at it from a political standpoint, and we shouldn't look at it from a political standpoint as whether or not this is going to hurt one person's campaign versus another.
Well said.
I would agree. And kind of going back to Kevin's point, talking about the notion of there's a difference between pointing out what somebody has said or what somebody is saying and using verbiage like, but a bullseye. I think Biden's either the term about target or bullseye, whichever one it was. You guys can correct me, whichever one it was. Whereas it reminds me of like the way that the Supreme Court was trying to codify the notion of like free speech and incitement to violence, right? It's very specific. I could just say like, hey, I want to kill Darren. Well, that doesn't mean I'm actually going to go kill Darren. That doesn't mean my free speech has a right to be limited. But if I say, see that Darren right now, go kill him right now. He's on the street over there, standing there, go kill him. That is an incitement to violence. And I've argued multiple times in front of my, not argued with my students, but I've just argued with many people, and also, I guess, in the classroom as well. We've had these discussions as well, that a lot of Trump's words have been insightful like that. Not insightful, but incitement, where he has been inciting violence by using terms like that, or skirting just around the very edge of it, but using terms like beat that guy up, get that guy, the hell out of here, and punch him in the face. And I mean, that's pretty direct. Again, until that this idea of it, and I know that Kevin you were very careful at saying about not saying, but that the left has definitely made its comments, right? My husband brought up to me about Maxine Waters saying, well, if you see people out there, in restaurants, whatever, say something to them, confront them. Confront them, though, is different than saying, I'm going to go beat that guy up. Go punch that guy in the face. There is a difference. I don't advocate what Maxine Waters said. That is not how I would handle things. But are they the same thing? And like I said, I'm just tired of this idea of them both having to be the same for us all to feel better. Now, maybe that's what has to happen in order for us to have more consensus and to move forward. Maybe that's why we are lacking in consensus. I don't know. But to me, they're just not the same. And
Right.
to point that out does not, I don't think, makes someone just necessarily biased. I'm pointing out an obvious fact. This is what this one person said, and this is what that person said. They're not the same thing.
Right. Well, and it's also not the same thing that there are examples of rhetoric on the left and the right that is out of bounds and
Yes.
has no place in our politics. But, if you're focusing on either their president or presidential candidates as leaders of both parties, I just don't think you can, there's between Joe Biden and Donald Trump, there really isn't a comparison of the type of rhetoric that they've had. And again, we're not saying that rhetoric directly causes political violence, such as what happened on Saturday, although it can contribute to it.
And it keeps the tone. Sorry, I'm sorry, Kevin. Pardon me.
No, please go ahead.
I was just say that it just keeps the whole tenor. Just it's a hostile tone that we have going on right now, and it's like it's not surprising that people are being impacted by this. It's when you have such hostile language and jargon and violent rhetoric being thrown around, it just puts everyone on edge. I felt after I heard that news, we were driving downtown afterwards, and I think I mentioned to you guys, I could just feel on the road, everyone felt just kind of enraged. Maybe that was just me, but it seemed like there was so much road rage on, and I was just aware of it all around me. Again, maybe this was completely in my head and not actually even happening, but that type of stuff, this does have an impact on all of us. It was upsetting because it feels like this has gone to just not another high, another low. And then what does that mean moving forward?
Right. And what it means going forward, I think real concerns that we could further, this kind of death spiral, if you will, of escalation. And so again, I think it'll be interesting to see how this week goes with the Republican National Convention, and how President Biden and former President Trump handle this moment. I think because there is an opportunity for there to be some change. That doesn't mean that it's going to instantly fix everything and that everybody, all their supporters are going to change their minds and their actions. But I think it would be a really good first step. Other thoughts?
I just think, going back to what I said before, is it going to get worse or is it going to get better? I can't even envision how much farther or further we can sink with our political rhetoric than we already have based on the assassination attempt that we had on Saturday. I mean, I don't know how much lower we can go at this point.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, there is worse. I mean, it's definitely bad, and Saturday was horrific, and I just worry that there's ways for it to get worse, and hopefully it doesn't. But
yes. And Kevin, I know you have to go as well. I'm just piggybacking off of what Darren said earlier, just reminding me of something, the kind of about social media. I think part of the problem is that so many of our lawmakers, and I just was watching a clip of something of one of the committee meetings, when they're out there, a lot of this is due to they are making statements for their social media accounts. They're not there necessarily to legislate. And that keeps the rhetoric inflamed as well. That does not lower the tenor as well. And it'd be nice to see if we had lawmakers who were just there to legislate, to actually be there to be serious. And there are plenty of them who are there. It would be great to see some more of those people, though, see their platforms be elevated a little bit more, rather than just the ones that are just the loudmouths and what they're saying, their reactions to it. Because I think that does not help at all. The idea that, like, you know, you act one way in front of the camera, but as soon as the camera's off, you're talking and acting like a normal person. Well, it's that you could post it on your whatever, on your TikTok or your Instagram, or whatever you're putting it on afterwards, so that you could get likes, or that you could impress, you know, certain people.
Or campaign donations. I mean, that's
Or
a lot of
campaign
ways that
donations.
they can get funding for their campaigns, is to have something that goes viral on social media,
Right.
and then get people nationwide to donate to their election campaigns. Well, yeah, like we said, we wanted to keep it short today. You know, I hope that things get better in the United States. And like Darren had said earlier, and what he had read from Threads, you know, it really is on all of us to try to improve the situation in our families, in our communities, in the classroom, to whoever we talk to. And so I hope all of us take it upon ourselves to, you know, leave our democracy better than we found it. And currently, I don't think we're in that place. So, all right, thanks everyone. Appreciate it.